In 1975, Deep Purple released Come Taste the Band. This is the only album with the Mark IV lineup, which featured a new guitarist who replaced Ritchie Blackmore. But was this guitarist the person who brought down the band? That's what I want to talk about in this video, as I will be telling the story from the departure of Ritchie Blackmore to the auditions, where they found a new guitarist, how they recorded the album, which was a departure from their original hard rock style, and how this new person caused so many problems during the recording sessions, it possibly led to the band's demise, where they would not make another album for another 9 years. That's what I want to talk about today. Let me get into the story. By 1975, Deep Purple were one of the biggest rock bands in the world. Their sound had been changing over the course of the last few albums, and Ritchie Blackmore was not happy about that, so he ended up leaving the band and starting his own band called Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Many people thought that this marked the end of Deep Purple. The band was left with 4 members: David Coverdale on vocals, Glenn Hughes on bass and vocals, as well as original members John Lord on keyboards and Ian Pace on drums. According to David Coverdale, he was invited to join Rainbow by Ritchie Blackmore, but he declined the offer, which would make an interesting what-if scenario, but let me get back to the story. At this point, the original members, John Lord and Ian Pace, were going to call it quits, but David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes insisted that they continue and hold auditions for a new guitarist. The band's management was also behind this decision. David Coverdale even suggested changing the band's name to either Purple or Good Company, but the others disagreed. The band felt that keeping the Deep Purple name would benefit the band financially. It was now time for them to find a guitarist. David Coverdale recommended a few guitarists, such as Jeff Beck, Rory Gallagher, and Tommy Bolin. They held auditions at Robert Simon's Pirate Studio in Hollywood. There was one well-known guitarist who auditioned, Glenn Clemson from Humble Pie, but he wasn't chosen. In the end, the person who was chosen was Tommy Bolin, an American guitarist who played with various bands such as James Gang and others. Tommy Bolin might not have seemed like the best choice at first because, first of all, he wasn't a rock guitarist. He only played fusion jazz. Secondly, he didn't know the band's records. He didn't know anything about the band's discography or their image. But despite this, the audition went well, and Tommy Bolin was given the job. Some people also believe that he also joined the band just to gain visibility and money with the intention of promoting his solo career. Now it's the middle of 1975. There are lots of rumors about what's happening with Deep Purple. In June of 1975, the band announced that Ritchie Blackmore was officially out and that Tommy Bolin was joining the band. The new lineup was well received. The band got along with Tommy Bolin. He was a very cheerful and outgoing person. They were happy to have him, as Ritchie Blackmore was somebody who was very argumentative and difficult to work with. Not only that, Tommy Bolin and Glenn Hughes became close friends, and surprisingly, Ritchie Blackmore also said that Tommy Bolin was a good choice as his successor. There was a little bit of a problem with Deep Purple's managers. They were concerned about time availability because he was already contracted to record and promote his own upcoming solo album, but the band decided to work it out and give Tommy some time to work on his solo career. This was the beginning of the Mark IV lineup, and Come Taste the Band was the only album recorded by this lineup. It's now time to record the album. Recordings took place at Musicland Studios in Munich, Germany from August 3rd to September 1st, 1975. Fortunately, most of the material had already been composed before they began recording, as most of the songs were written by both David Coverdale and Tommy Bolin, who had used a lot of material from his previous bands, many of which he had written with his friend Jeff Cook. Band members also gave Tommy Bolin enough space to compose freely, which really worked in his favor. The album was produced by Martin Birch in collaboration with the band, while Ian Pace joined Martin Birch to mix the record. Tommy Bolin was a different type of guitarist. He wasn't like Ritchie Blackmore. He used lots of effects pedals, which was something that Ritchie Blackmore didn't do as much. He also used a lot of overlapping guitar tracks on this particular album. John Lord's keyboards were more in the background, with the exception of a solos on Love Child, and the keyboard driven this time around on which he plays all the instruments. But not everything was smooth sailing, as there were a lot of difficulties with the members' substance abuse problems. One of the biggest problems was Tommy Bolin. He was somebody who took drugs in excess and also used heroin and other opioids off and on. The other members didn't really see it as much of a problem at first, but he wasn't the only problem. Glenn Hughes was also addicted to cocaine, and he had been for some time. Road crew tried to prevent drug use by hiding the drugs and even beating up drug dealers, but it really didn't work. The drugs eventually were smuggled into Tommy Bolin and Glenn Hughes as they found ways to get the drugs in. Eventually, Glenn Hughes was sent to drug rehab in London after being beaten up, but the public was told that Glenn Hughes had a liver infection. As a result, Glenn Hughes provides a lot less vocals than he did on the previous two Deep Purple albums, which were Burn and Stormbringer. You can really only hear Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale's vocals on the last song, You Keep On Moving, but the two vocalists also sang on the song called Dealer. Fortunately, Glenn Hughes had time to record most of the bass tracks before he left. There's also one song called Coming Home, which features Tommy Bolin on bass. Upon completion of the recording sessions, the other members told Glenn Hughes that his continuation in the band was conditional on him taking care of himself. Tommy Bolin later completed his solo album called Teaser, which was released in November of 1975. Let me now talk about the songs. Then after this, I'll talk about the aftermath of what happened to the band, including the death of one of the members. The album has 9 tracks, with 5 tracks on side 1 and 4 on side 2. The original album is 37 minutes long. The album opens with Coming Home. The song has a combination of Deep Purple's old and new style. It begins with a drum intro by Ian Pace, and you can hear Tommy Bolin's playing for the first time, especially his use of different guitar pedal effects. Many fans enjoy the song and feel it's an energetic and straightforward rock song. After this is Lady Luck. It was composed by Jeff Cook, and this is one of the songs that Tommy Bolin early had written when he joined Deep Purple. Tommy Bolin actually had been performing it live over the past 4 years, but Deep Purple brought new life to the song. David Coverdale finished the lyrics and wrote it about a blue-eyed gypsy queen. The next song is called Getting Tighter. This is a guitar-driven and upbeat song which has vocals by Glenn Hughes, and probably the funkiest Deep Purple song in their catalog. The song begins with a guitar riff that was written by Tommy Bolin, and they took it from there. Then there's the song Dealer. This one has a dark tone lyrically. It's a story of David Coverdale's attempt to talk some sense into Glenn Hughes to curb him from addiction. It also features Tommy Bolin on vocals for a few bars. The last song on side A is called I Need Love, a typical David Coverdale type of song about sex. Features a female backup singer. Side B begins with a song called Drifter, which is a fast-paced song, and another one that had already been completed. Many fans compare the song to Mistreated from the album Burn. Then there's a song Love Child, which a lot of people say is reminiscent of Led Zeppelin, and one of the guitar riffs was influenced by Tommy Bolin's previous band, James Gang. This is one of the songs where you really hear John Lord on keyboards. Then the song called This Time Around, Ode to G. It's a piano ballad. Glenn Hughes sings over John Lord's keyboards, and the song transitions into one of Tommy Bolin's solo songs called Ode to G, which is an instrumental. The letter G is a tribute to composer George Gershwin, who served as the inspiration for Deep Purple songs Black Knight and Burn. The last song is called You Keep On Moving. This is the only song where David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes have equal vocal time on the entire song. The song was composed in 1974 before Tommy Bolin joined. He didn't contribute to the composition, but his guitar playing is heavily featured in the song. The song has been compared to a typical Queen ballad. There's one more song that didn't appear on the original album. It appears on the reissue. It's called Same in L.A. The song only has a few bars of vocals in the beginning of the song. The album was released on their own label called Purple Records. There were only 2 singles, which were You Keep On Moving in the UK and Getting Tighter in the US. Sales were moderately successful, but didn't sell as well as previous albums. It did pretty well in the UK, charting at number 19, and held its place for 4 weeks. In the US, it only peaked at number 43 by the second week of 1976 and spent 14 weeks on the charts. The highest numbers were in New Zealand and Norway, where it peaked at number 6. The band went out on tour, but there were lots of problems as Tommy Bolin didn't want to play the songs from the Ritchie Blackmore era in that particular Blackmore style. Not only that, but Tommy Bolin didn't even know how to play these songs properly. There were also lots of improvised guitar and keyboard solos, which were performed separately instead of parts of actual songs during this tour. They also played a few songs from Tommy Bolin's solo album called Teaser, as I mentioned before. Drugs were a major problem that really affected the tour. They'd been all over the world, and at the beginning of 1976, they went on a U.S. tour, but that only lasted 2 months and included 30 shows. The band was completely burnt out at that point. They were originally just going to take a break and resume performances in the summer, but they ended up playing another 5 more concerts in the UK in March of 1976. But those concerts received a lot of negative reviews because of the drug use and also because the audience was demanding that Ritchie Blackmore come back to the band, which Tommy Bolin did not like. The final concert was on March 15, 1976 in the Liverpool Empire Theatre. After this concert, John Lord and Ian Pace decided to take a break, which eventually led to the band going on a long hiatus. Tommy Bolin then formed his own band and toured with Peter Frampton and Jeff Beck. He also recorded another solo album called Private Eyes, but unfortunately, this is where the story gets sad. Tommy Bolin died of drug intoxication on December 4th, 1976. He was only 25 years old. After this, David Coverdale went back to Germany and started a solo career. He released 2 solo albums, which are White Snake and North Winds, and then put together a band called White Snake, which is a whole other story. At this point, there's no Deep Purple for another 8 or 9 years until the Mark II lineup got back together and released Perfect Strangers. Speaking of Perfect Strangers, I did a video on that not too long ago. I'll link that right here. You can watch it next. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.